Welcome to the Unily Podcast. I'm Paul Seda. I'll be hosting you today. Yada yada yada. Okay, so why are we here? Why are we doing this? Look, we're in the business of employee experience platforms, right? It's what the Unily product is, but through our time, we've picked up a lot of best practices and knowledge and kind of seen a lot of trends across many different industries, many different customers. We thought it was worthwhile to share some of that stuff and do it in the format that we kind of do it every day, which is us doing informal discussions at work as peers, because we all bring very different perspectives and insights. And there's just some wonderful stuff that we discussed that we thought maybe we should just share this with everyone out there in the universe. So that's why we're here today. So what can you expect from the podcast moving forward? We want to play around with the format a little bit. It's going to be experimental. We'll play around with water cooler style conversations. We'll do some interviews. We'll invite guests. It won't be locked into any specific format because we want it to be fun and we want to play around with it. And we really just want to give you, in all versions of this, our latest take on the news and trends and what's going on and what we're seeing. As I mentioned, we'll have guests, some stars, although I think everyone is a star these days. And hopefully it'll give you a laugh, right? There'll be some fun, some unscripted moments, whether they're intentional or not. We want to give you insight into how we actually work together and talk about this. Let me introduce you very quickly to some of the people I'm joined by today. A great group, a group that I have a lot of respect for. First, Alex Gabelli joining us from the UK. Kaz Hassan also in the UK, and Caitlin Oriema joining us from just outside of New York City. Hello, all of you. Thanks for coming. So I want to kind of set things up for you before we have a discussion, okay? What we're talking about today is what does it take to deliver a meaningful employee experience in 2021, all right? As I mentioned, we're an employee experience platform in the intro. We're doing this to share our experiences. But again, all of you have unique perspectives on this because of life experience, age, et cetera, et cetera. We all have our own ways of looking at this. So that's kind of our overall topic. And I'm going to throw to each of you with some very specific questions about this. The important thing for our listeners to understand is we're here to inspire you and help you solve your challenges, right? So take what we're saying, all of us, at face value. This is just how we feel. Depending on the circumstances, it might work better for you in certain situations versus others. But I want to keep this lively and I don't want to be prescriptive. So let's, understanding that big topic, let's start with a question. And I actually want to start with Alex. Because Alex is one of my favorite speakers whenever we do something at Unily. She's energetic and she just has some really unique kind of ways of looking at things. So tell me, how do you think the workplace has changed, understanding that employee experience has a new level of importance to leaders these days? What's changed over the years as you've worked in the space?
Okay, so I would say a lot of it, I mean, again, as you know, Paul, quite often I struggle with trying to compress all of my thoughts on experience into one little thing. So really what I've seen change is the focus on it and the importance of it. And I would say that overall the meaning of an employee experience has not changed. It's all about what the employees are perceiving and doing and how they're engaging and, all of those things. People don't change that way, and the way that your employees are engaging doesn't change. They're, they learn more and they have greater expectations. But what I've really seen is that leadership now looks at this and says, oh, right, so if I get this wrong, that's it, I'm kind of done for. And that's the one thing that makes me just, that little glimmer in my eye when I'm talking to them or listening to them, and I'm thinking, yeah, because you know what? It's not about you. You're paying. But what this is about the people who are using this day in, day out, and they're more important in the overall aspect of this. And just the fact that that's now accepted, it's sort of almost demanded. That's really been what I've seen. And I'm talking over like 20 years.
Well, that's a good time frame to look at it. And it's interesting you say that, because one of the things we've talked about, we do a lot of webinars, we do a lot of in-person things. And one of the things that we've discussed is more and more studies are coming out showing the relationship between employee experience and performance, and however you manage or measure performance, rather, whether it's productivity or revenue or some other measure. If you're non-for-profit, they may be slightly different measures for you, but it does seem to be something that people are paying closer attention to, right? And actually, I was gonna throw to Kaz now, and ask him, Kaz, what are some of the keywords that you hear when you've engaged with customers in the past that let you know employee experience is what they're actually after at the end of the day? Because I don't know if everyone is using that terminology.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. So it's funny because like Alex and I have worked quite closely together on a lot of clients in different industries and all sorts of sizes of companies and stuff. And you start to, as you go into a new type of company, start to listen for the things or the kind of the words, or I think the will is the right thing you're looking for. But I think the kind of difference is I think you might have some companies that kind of look at it from like a checklist perspective, who might do a lot of research and maybe look out and say, okay, we've seen this research and this is something we need to jump on the bandwagon on. Let's get an IT project sorted and let's roll this out. But I think like where the real difference is when people start putting together the technology with the culture. So I think there's kind of been like this gradual wave, and you kind of alluded to it earlier where you were speaking about this people focusing on employee experience. And I think part of that is because in terms of different generations, we speak quite openly now about kind of bringing your whole self to work, and I think that's a two-way street. So that's kind of like part of that relationship is that the company providing that back. And so when we speak to a project team, for example, or when we're speaking to organizations going through this change, trying to implement an employee experience platform, as an example, when they are trying to specifically tune into culture and are trying to communicate to us what they want to convey throughout their employee experience platform. Like, it's less about the platform, more about the employee experience and how they do that. And that's what I'm looking out for.
Yeah, and it's funny because Alex is nodding furiously as you're speaking, so I think she agrees with you. I can't tell unless she's a reverse person who nods when she disagrees. Yeah. No, that's excellent, and I think what I heard is actually that you didn't quite say it, but I think what you were getting at, and maybe you did say it, is that there's a correlation between understanding employee experience is what you really need and success. And Caitlin worked as a CSM here, so she worked with some of our major accounts in the US, and she and I we actually lived very close to one another. We're friends. We see each other regularly, and we always have this discussion that there's almost, you can tell based on the verbiage people are using whether or not they get it and whether or not they're going to be successful. So Kate, I'm just curious if anything Kaz is saying resonates with you, and maybe a war story, always anonymizing, never using real names to protect the innocent. Some of the things you've seen that were tells that, this might not be going on the right track, and I need to reframe things.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting, like when I think about employee experience too, and I think a lot of our customers ask for kind of, or when we think about even designing things for success, it's like looking for a templated experience based on all the success other customers have had, and like, give me the one size fits all experience so I can get this going. But because every organization's culture and objectives are so different and unique, trying to take that path sometimes can go sideways, because what works for one company isn't going to work for everyone. So even something as simple as, seeing who's viewed your profile or something. And that's even changed in the past 2 years where we're not doing that anymore and we're anonymizing that. That was like a big culture shift. I remember that caused waves at one of our clients where they weren't used to seeing that and didn't want that like LinkedIn experience that we see in their intranet experience too. And while they thought that would increase engagement, they were getting all this like rapid, fast and furious feedback about it, which was great because it showed engagement and it showed that people were on and seeing things like that, but they had to quickly undo it because there was ramifications about it. So I think even when it comes down to like, a really great landing experience for your, we talk about a digital HQ and what does that look like? It should be very much based on not even like roles or departments you might have or business functions. It's more like what are the different personas you have in your organization in terms of what they need and what they expect and what they want to get out of their experience at the company and creating that experience for them.
You also hit on something that I think a lot of companies are afraid to outright admit, but I'm going to do it. We're going to say it. We've learned as we've been going to as a company, and we continue to learn. And you get that great example of we used to be able to alert you when someone viewed your profile because we thought that was a good idea. And culturally, with a lot of companies, it was a little bit of the creep factor, right? I don't want to know this person is looking at me, and we learned from that.
You don't want other people to know that you're looking at their profile.
Right, like I normally look up Kaz because I want to figure out, what is his, how do I dress like Kaz? How do I be like Kaz? But I don't want him to know that I'm doing that because that's creepy. And Kaz is now thinking, oh my God.
I'm now trying to make my profile private. So how do I block Paul?
Right. How do I block Paul? Right. How do I get him away from me? But the point being that we've learned too. I think what's fascinating is that over time, and all of you have hit on it, things have changed, right? Alex talking about going back 20 years, now it matters. Kaz saying our generation is very much like I'm bringing myself to work. And Caitlin talking about even shorter time frames of us really, having to learn and figure out what works for cultures. And that's tricky for us too. I mean, the great thing about our platform is it's so configurable. So if something doesn't really work for you guys, you don't have to use it. But time does seem to be an element to everything we're saying. And I want to get back to the now in 2021, because that's where we find ourselves, right? 2020 is a year that is going to go down in history as being remarkable. Right. It will be remembered and talked about for a very long time. We're now in the new year where everyone's resetting. What are some of the things that we've changed as a result of what happened in 2020? And I want to ask you, Alex, what have you seen early on in 2021 or maybe at the end of 2020 that made you go, this is different from what we had before?
Yeah. I think just to sort of also wrap that into what we were just talking about and everyone following Kaz's profile, I think what I saw almost immediately, and there were probably a few things that prompted this, but what I've noticed is the way in which people talk about themselves, and how people are able to, not really open up, but in a way we've dropped the curtains slightly. So right now we're having this chat and we're all sitting here in our sort of homes, and I'm thinking, well, I'm letting you in a little bit more into how I talk about myself, and or how I think about myself or where I live or whatever. But I've also noticed, like, for instance, I might look at Kaz's online profile with a view towards, I want to know what Kaz says about his own experiences and his own self, because I can't have a conversation with him about it necessarily. Or if I do, it's a very proactive one. There's no water cooler chat. There's no, Kaz and I used to, hang out in the kitchen and drink a cup of coffee and catch up and talk about it and sort of, tell a funny anecdotal story. And now I don't really have that opportunity. But what I've noticed is the vast majority of people, even when you look at their profiles outside of our own organization, or when I'm, looking at my clients' profiles and the way that they're setting those up, and I'm looking at LinkedIn and I'm looking at the other sort of, mainly LinkedIn, I notice that people are a lot more open about who they are as people because they feel a lot more comfortable online, which begets the idea that people are more expressive online. And I think that for a long time that was underestimated. So, if I sort of try to dial that back a little, it's like we talk a lot about how, millennials and Gen Zs, they're really into having everything at their fingertips and all the apps and all of that. And I'm thinking, well, I'm neither of those things, obviously, but I expect those things too. I expect to feel more comfortable online. I expect to not just go from, saying, hey, Kaz, how's it going at the water cooler, to being able to have a similar conversation digitally. It's not possible. I have to try harder. And in order to make that more successful, I have to open up harder. I have to sell myself a little bit more. I have to explain to you in a shorter amount of time what makes me me. You might be able to pick up some of my cues, you might not be able to. And I've just seen, I think I was a little amazed at how fast that happened. I mean, you're talking 1 year. And I'm not saying that all the tools were there and ready, right? So that we always talk about that the last year hasn't made things possible. It's just sort of made them faster. We've delivered faster because demand is higher, because people's expectations have gone up. But what I was really amazed at was how comfortable people became faster, because when you have no choice, but then they take it to the next level and really just sort of like, not only do I have no choice, I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm going to make this better. I'm not just going to talk on Zoom. I'm going to be like the awesomest Zoom presenter ever. It was that kind of thing. So just for me, it's very much been about now this could be the way that we have relationships with clients, with our colleagues going forwards, and we don't know when that's going to stop. And I just see the embracing.
So I want to pull one thing out of that, because and I'll actually ask Caitlin what she's seen, because Caitlin also works with on the sales side now. So Caitlin's worked across the business, so she's got some really interesting perspectives. She's seen what it's like in an assembly line or the life cycle of a customer at Unily. She's worked across the full thing. You talked about people are opening themselves up. And one thing I'll say is we use our own tool in-house, but we're also a company that is really born of internet culture. My favorite thing in the world is GIFs and memes when I'm asking product questions or broadcasting it internally to say, hey, does anyone have something on this? I love GIFs and memes. I'm a creature of Reddit, right? Like, I love it. So I'm just curious, Caitlin, what have you seen, number one, as current customers? How are they using the tools to kind of be themselves? Interesting things. And what are some of the things that on the sales side that are maybe new in terms of how they're using the tool set to be themselves and bring themselves to work? Because you can be very formal with these tools, right? But what Alex is saying, and what I think is true, is people are not being very formal as they're using these employee experience platforms.
Yeah, I think about like when we first went remote overnight, the whole world went remote, and what the expectations were for everybody was like cameras on all the time, right? Everybody's like getting ready, and I got to look my best, and I'm getting my light ready and everything. When we were in March of 2020, and then fast forward to now, and people are more accepting of, like, we've become fatigued with a lot of that. And we've kind of, whether it was genuinely a part of company culture and the employee experience before about being open about, not okay is okay, and, expressing yourself and how you're actually really doing. And maybe one day, like, a prospect doesn't want to have their, a prospect we're speaking to doesn't want to have their video on, or we turn our videos on because, you know, that's like, you know, the culture that they're expressing, or even on an internal Teams call, right? Like we've kind of shifted as people have needed and as things have changed. But I think from how customers are using too, from the social experience, kind of like the two-way communications, the direct messaging became like more prevalent than ever. We saw like such a massive spike in social usage, meaning like not just talking about the collaboration tools like Teams or Slack or, you know, what people are using to collaborate within projects and teams, but more of like the intra and intercompany communications, and creating separate spaces and channels for people to talk about different things with each other based on like what they needed at the time. And when you can make those kind of like overnight changes, because our world was changing week over week in the past year, it was really powerful, I think, for the employee experience, because companies were adjusting to what people needed at that point in time. And that was, it's interesting. I think when I speak to people in my network, you know, whether personal or at work, we have so many conversations about company culture and how they feel about their company following, you know, the pandemic, for example, because you learned really quickly if your company genuinely supported things like happiness in the workplace, you know, supporting mental health initiatives, because it became such an urgent need to acknowledge and support at work. So it does tie back to what Alex was talking about being like, and what Kaz said about bringing your whole self to work. It's like, you did start to almost, by force almost get to know people better. Like we can see each other's homes. We hear kids and dogs playing in the background. Like we're connecting on kind of a totally different level, because we're seeing each other outside of like just the standalone like corporate setting that we're used to.
It's okay to be me, I think, is what's happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's funny actually, because like what both Caitlin and Alex were saying there, like when they were talking about the big changes and stuff, both the ways you spoke about it were about how like you as an individual and you and your network and how you're making connections and stuff. And I think when we talk about like meaningful employee experiences, like I think there's a bit of a natural inclination to think, oh, like what is a company going to do? It's this kind of like top down thing that you need to manage or micromanage. But it's actually like interesting to see, like, if you want a meaningful employee experience, you need like a way in which that the individuals are able to kind of live in that and make that employee experience.
Yeah. And make it, you need to give those opportunities to those employees to make of it what they need it to be in order to feel that they can continue to be themselves.
That's right. That's right. And I'm gonna take that, because again, this is a topic I love. Internet culture, right? And norms that form almost instantaneously. The famous story is the hashtag became a thing in social media because Twitter users figured out it was a great way to search across topics on the platform. So Twitter made it a formal feature that now you could click and do that. And my favorite thing is when customers come back to me and they go, you know, we put some ground rules, but we didn't go really hard on how people are supposed to use stuff. And they came up with their own methods for governance, and it's working fabulously. That kind of ground up rather than top down. Now, I think we favor both. I don't mean to speak for all of you, but I think we've found a combination of the two works really well. But I do think what's fascinating and what is finally gaining ground, even though we've been spouting it for a long time, is let some of the ideas bubble up from the bottom. You know, kind of set the watch running and see what happens. Don't be too prescriptive.
Yeah. The hashtagging allows that more like organic experience versus like how people use topics as kind of, you know, company metadata to tag to things so that you can find things easily, versus the organic nature of people who are hashtagging something because they're used to using that on things like Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. And then you can see what's trending internally. And that's like what tells you more about your culture and employee experience versus forming it, like you said, from the top down.
So, and I'll open up the kimono before I ask Kaz a very pointed question about like trends in terms of technology. But I'll let people know about this. Caitlin, it might have been you that started it. I don't remember, but someone started the hashtag maybe a bug on our social network. They pointed out something. They were looking for guidance. Was it you, Caitlin? Do you remember if it was you?
I don't think I could take credit for that. I don't remember. I've tried to start some trends, other trends.
Yeah, someone started a trend where they pointed something out, and it was jokey to be fun and lighthearted. And they wrote a post about, hey, I'm looking at the software and I see this behavior. Is this as designed? And then they tagged it, maybe a bug. And it became a little bit of a goof, and people were using it to be like, we should use this as a way to filter out things that might be a bug. And it was fun, and people were playful with it, because bugs can be a source of stress for people and a source of anxiety, because you're worried that you're gonna have to tell your boss, oh, this doesn't work exactly the way. But just by kind of using that loose and free, and like, this is a safe space for me to have fun with this, people said, you know what, this might actually work as a way for us to keep track of these things and to bubble up this topic, so that the parties that really need to look at it can filter on it and come back to it. So that's just a fun one that I think of. So Kaz, let me ask you this question. You're on our product marketing team, so I'm putting you on the spot. What are the trends in employee experience right now that are influencing how you and the other members of the team are thinking about releasing new features? Because I think there's micro trends and there's macro trends, and I'm curious, what are some of the things you're seeing that are influencing how you think about, evolving the platform, right? Because it's evergreen. It's meant to constantly have things added to it. So could you give us insight into that, or are you bound by some secret cabal agreement to not talk about it?
I'll try and say as much as I can, and I'm sure someone will there'll be someone at my door by the end of this call. So if I suspiciously disappear, then you know what's happened. But yeah, it's funny because there are in that employee experience space, I think there are the trends that I think are more typical and we're expecting to see, and I think there are the ones that perhaps you overlook a little bit or a bit more atypical. And I think one of the more common ones that I think people will be aware of, but more in terms of a buzzword initially, is like mobile. People know that mobile is a bit of a buzzword, and when it comes to things like employee experiences, people always tend to think like, oh, we need a mobile offering or we need a mobile app. And that's an area that we've spent a lot of time looking at, but at a deeper level. So not just having like a mobile offering, really thinking about how does the device of mobile fit within the employee experience. So spending a lot of effort trying to think about how does the mobile device and the flexibility of being able to go on, like being on the go with it, being like a really quick medium, how does that provide value to people that are out and about and in the field and are kind of frontline workers, but also giving it time to breathe in terms of looking at the other consumer experiences that we use mobile for. So if you think of something like Instagram or Facebook, it's quite funny because if I ever try to use one of those apps, even if I'm on desktop, I don't like Google Facebook or Google Instagram. I just get my mobile and I use it. And there's a reason for that. And it's because you've got this kind of quicker swiping interface, and it's a kind of different type of content you're looking to consume. So it's thinking about what content do we want to provide on mobile, and making sure that a mobile offering isn't just the same as desktop. It's respectful of what that device is for and how it adds value.
Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
I
know, right?
They didn't take them away, so that's good news.
No, I know.
So you're still with us.
What's hard about mobile. I've seen this. I mean, for years, everybody comes in and says, we're a mobile first company, so we have to have an amazing mobile experience, and we've evolved our product to accommodate that. But then when it comes down to it, I think sometimes there's confusion about it's like the what comes first, the chicken or the egg story about mobile adoption and engagement. So it goes back to that, like, what is it that your employees need from a mobile experience? And then how can you deliver it to them? Like when I think about, I personally use our mobile intranet for, quite a bit. And it's the way when I see push notifications in the morning, like it's a way to go through and see what's happened really quickly. And that's kind of how I am going into any other consumer apps too, right? I see something flashes up and then I click into it and then I'm seeing everything else going on. And it's the same for, your intranet and the employee experience you're providing. When you're seeing a notification about it, you're clicking into it. I see that notification and then I'm hopping around and seeing everything else that's happened.
I was going to add one thing in there as well, is obviously people are traveling less, so that kind of on the move functionality is not really something that everybody needs from their mobile device. But what I use it for, because I still have it wherever I'm going in my house, I have my mobile device.
Yes.
But what I like to do is, before I've really sat down properly at my desktop, laptop, with all the gear and engaged with work, I'm able to sort of check some of those notifications. Now, obviously, they're not all going to be work ones. I've got all my apps sort of sending me the notifications that I want. But again, I think it's a little bit like what Caitlin's getting at there. You can peek in. It's like peeking in, get my brain sort of set up for the day. I kind of know what's coming. There's a few bits and bobs. I can digest that across the board, along with maybe BBC News for me. And maybe I'm peeking into what are my friends saying on Facebook. There might be something that's a conversation going on LinkedIn. But I'm also bringing in my own company app into part of that to let me know as well what's been going on. Of course, we work globally, so there's stuff that's been going on overnight for me, and I can peek in the morning. But again, that's what I'm using my phone for. It's like a little quick touch to get in there. It's a little quick touch to just get my brain sort of buzzing along and seeing what are all the things I need to consider. And then when I'm at my desktop, that's the full experience. I'm here, I'm going to do work, contact me kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah.
It's funny. 2 quick points, and then I have actually another question for the group. But I'm so tied to my phone. I just purchased a home. I'm telling everyone about it. They're sick of hearing it, but I'm going to talk about it because I'm excited. And you know what? I'm in control of this podcast now, so I get to say whatever I want. So I purchased this home, and I'm a bit of a tinkerer. I'm an electronics hobbyist, right? So I play around with things like an Arduino and the Raspberry Pi and soldering and things like that. It's just a thing I was always interested in as a boy, but I never really had an opportunity to try out. So I buy my home and I go immediately, I'm getting a smart home. I didn't know what that meant, but I looked it up. I started setting up all these sensors, and now I cannot operate my home without my phone. I cannot. I've made a terrible mistake, but that's how important these phones are now. From a day-to-day perspective. And why shouldn't, I be able to, like you said, Alex, set myself up for the day in preparation for when I finally do sit down in front of my machine and I'm fully committed to just work. But, the other thing, and then I'll move on, was I remember customers saying, one customer in particular, was actually a shared customer of Caitlin and mine when we worked together on the customer success side and consulting side, was he said, I read my documentation. He was in a semi-technical role. I read my documentation on my train to work, right? He reads his internal documentation. And that may not have been as relevant in 2020, but it kind of still is, because you're running around getting the kids ready. You're in the kitchen making your coffee, right? And you may just want to go, oh, let me check something because I know I have a meeting today on this topic. Let me find the article and maybe send myself the link so that I can read it when I finally do commit. So there's a danger to this, and maybe we'll cover that in another podcast, because the question is, when do you switch off? And it's a topic I'd like to talk about, but there's also tremendous advantages. There's tremendous advantages to it. All right.
Well, and that's the thing with mobile too. I think just to finalize that point is, the ability to have settings for the mobile experience too, because you do have it, like Alex said, all the time on you. So you need to be able to turn certain things on and off and set that. And I think there's also a way to, just from a customer example perspective too. I know we spoke with Cardinal Health about, trying to engage frontline workers via mobile, but then really what it actually came down to when they're looking at those personas is creating a desktop experience for their frontline worker managers, so that they can actually create key messages being delivered to them in person, or syndicating that message in other ways to those frontline workers. And I know they're joining us for our internal communications panel event, quick plug, that's coming up. So we'll hear more on that later. But there are so many different ways that you can leverage mobile and then appropriately use it. Like you said, that could be a whole other few hours of conversations about that.
Right. Hashtag quick plug. Well done, Caitlin. Yeah. Subliminal messaging. She's going to be doing that too regularly, just implanting subliminal messages in our minds without us realizing it. Right. So it worked on me. Now I know about the internal communications panel. So let's talk about a topic. We're kind of talking in and around the platform. We're talking about use cases, but I want to, and Kaz did touch on the technology a little bit. One of the questions I get frequently, and I'm guilty of this, I use employee experience platform sometimes interchangeably with intranet, and that's maybe a mistake. And I'll tell you my reasoning why. I think it actually has to do with connotation. The word intranet connotes something almost negative these days. It shouldn't. But it does. And I think looking instead, words matter, right? So labels matter. So calling an employee experience platform maybe gives focus to the intranet. So Alex, I wonder maybe, because we've talked, I know we've talked about this because we've been in conversations together. Yeah. What makes an employee experience platform different from an intranet in your mind? If words matter, is there something concrete as well that's different between them?
Yeah, I think if words matter, then quite often the employee experience platform, or anything that's including the word experience, however you're describing it, it's expansive. It's like, this is what it can be, anything. It's almost a sort of opportunity that it was just in a word. I mean, I know it's a mouthful, but still. And with intranet, yeah, it's unfortunate because technically it is pretty much the same thing. It is internal to your company, therefore it's not the same as like an extranet or the internet. But when I hear that word, I'm thinking, oh, close down. Okay, so it's going to be simple. It's going to be, I don't hear the opportunity. And I know that sounds mad because I'm in the industry. I talk about this all the time and it's just words. But for me, you're just highlighting and saying, you know what? Intranet to me means tool, like tool, software, something like that. IT. It's an IT thing. And then I'm looking at employee experience platform and I'm thinking, oh, event. This is like a thing that I can go to and experience and be in it. Potentially. I'm not saying every time I work on these things that's what happens, but that is how I bring it. I bring it like this is not about it being a tool. This is an experience. It has multiple facets. It has multiple versions. There are different ways that you're going to look at it and feel it, but it is very much... It's tangible in that kind of all the senses are on way. And I'm also not locking it down to anything in particular. I'm saying it's based on the employee, really.
So, Caitlin, you're a part of the sales team now, I mentioned. It used to be that the intranet was the realm of IT. What is it like now? Who's coming to us through the front door to say, talk to me about what you can do for me? Is it still IT? Is it some combination of groups? Who do you find yourself talking to?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The people who seem to come to us from, our prospective customers are that initial stakeholder is almost always on the either, communications team, human resources, or marketing, or a mix of both. And I'd say HR and comms are probably the most prevalent. But then after having been on the, delivery and implementation side of things and customer success side, you quickly find out, and we also advise on this, and before people are customers too, is that it does still need to very, very much be a partnership with your IT department, because they still are managing a lot of the technical facets of the overall employee experience, and they always will. Right. So there needs to be a partnership with them so that you can work successfully together to manage that experience and deliver things from all different sides of things in a successful way. Because, you got to get the right people information. You got to make sure people can log in on different devices. Are you BYOD? Do you have a mix of managed devices? There's so many different facets that even if comms and HR and marketing, et cetera, and the business side are those primary stakeholders, you need to work closely with your IT department too.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because an EXP is different from an intranet in terms of possibilities and what we're going for, right? And the connotation of what each of those mean. But IT is still an important part of it. Maybe not mission critical. They certainly aren't managing it anymore. They don't want to, which is probably a good thing. And by managing, I mean they don't want to, IT doesn't want to be creating content. They don't want to create your site or your. They don't want to own it. No. They are so far away from the day-to-day business topics that are actually good content on an intranet. They couldn't possibly succeed at it. And maybe that has been the challenge for years, is the wrong group owned it and was responsible for managing it.
But also,
from a content
I would just
perspective.
say, just as an addition to that, let's not sort of completely sideline IT, because they don't want to own it anymore, because they don't want to be responsible for it, because now they are part of the experience. Like, IT has moved into being part of that user experience as well. Certainly, they will have input. They need to be a part of what is going on, because there are technical aspects and it needs to align with all of the other things that are going on. But I came from IT where I built those experiences and there was no comms involvement, and we ended up owning stuff and nobody wanted it. And it was, but now you're looking at it and I'm engaging with IT departments as focus groups, because they need something from it. They are either offering themselves up as a service and they have a presence, or they're consuming what's on that because they're employees of that organization as well. And that to me is also important, and is also how it all sort of becomes more expansive than just the sort of technical or IT versus comms. It's ownership has changed, but it has allowed a more positive input, I think.
Sure. And Kaz, how do you, and maybe you don't agree with anything we've just said, Kaz is going, no.
But if you don't, we know where you live, so it's fine. We'll just.
That's right.
Yeah. Lights out. Whoop.
And we all know where Kaz lives because it's on his profile. We told you, Kaz, don't share that information. How do you? Okay, so there's multiple questions here, but I'll disguise it as one. How do you design for an employee experience platform versus an intranet on the product side? How do you differentiate design when you're designing for the employee experience? What are the most important elements of that?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. It's a hard one as well, because I have this internal battle being in the product team all the time. It's like you've got this kind of, on one side you've got form, and on the other side you've got function, and obviously you want to play the balance. And there are times I look at something and I'm like, oh, it's so pretty, but it's not functional. Like the kind of like OCD in me sometimes has to pull back and make sure that you kind of work from the user and that it achieves the aim. But like, to kind of answer your question a bit more directly, and kind of bouncing off what Alex and Caitlin were saying earlier as well, is that when we're kind of designing these product experiences, as well as the experience as well as the end user experience, and having things that have the right user interface and the right design, and that being able to replicate the design experience so it's kind of what we would call consumer grade experience, so it aligns with how users would experience things in their day-to-day. So looking at the world leading apps, things like Instagram, LinkedIn, how are they used to doing that stuff. So obviously that's one big part of it. But my initial instinct was actually, from a product perspective, one thing we like to do is to provide the flexibility that allows IT teams as partners, as kind of valued partners of HR and comms, to be able to come in, plug into the platform and do like a cool wraparound, which gives end users all the information that they need in a heartbeat. So things like search, as an example, is a great example, because earlier you spoke about what's the difference between an intranet and an employee experience platform, and I would probably say kind of an enterprise level or a good search that wraps around the employee and the employee experience is a big differentiator, and that's something that I would definitely say is like a big differentiator. So from a product perspective, what we want to do is say, yes, we want the nice, shiny, pretty stuff and great experiences for the end user. But part of that experience is to allow the technical teams to be able to easily plug in and bring in other systems that employees are using, having a nice single layer that everyone can access those systems. And I'm a bit of a search first person. Alex and I had a conversation the other day as to different types of users you have in your organization, how they navigate around a platform. And I enter a site search first. The other day I went onto a site and it might have been I was looking for like social, for example, the ability to have conversation. And there's a link right at the top of the navigation. It's the first thing you see when you enter the site. But still, my gut instinct was to go to the search bar and type it in. That's how search first I am. So from a product perspective, what we want to be able to do is provide people with the ability to plug in different data sources. So not just in your intranet, but looking aside. So looking at things like document management systems, HR systems, all this stuff, and being able to plug it in. So when an employee thinks of an employee experience platform, it's not just an intranet, because an intranet is an old school thing where, you had these ugly communication articles and things like that. And that for me is a big difference.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah. I was gonna... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Alex. No,
okay.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say...
You must...
No, because I know where Kaz has been, and having worked with him as in his previous role as a consultant, and it's sort of the same thing, and I can see that struggle, and then I can see the struggle, which is you have all those things, you have that functionality, and now I need to turn it around for you with the integrations and say, so now how are you going to experience it? So you have that sort of, here are all the things, but what do you need them to look like as a user, as a human who's coming in? How am I now going to access them? What do I need them served up to me as? And I think that is now the challenge that goes on. So we take all that great work that Kaz and the team are doing, and then sort of translate it round and turn it into an experience, and that is a continual challenge as well, because I don't just want experience. I want good experience. I want I want more than good experience, because experience, there it is. Good experience, bit of a challenge. More than good experience, I think it's absolutely doable, but it's, it is not something that you undertake lightly.
I'm going to stop it there. I wanted to thank you guys. That was really fun as a discussion. Alex, Kaz, Caitlin, all of you, we're really grateful for your thoughts and your experiences, and obviously you're going to be back in future sessions for us to take much more controversial topics, right? The topic of Kaz and where he lives is going to be top of that list. Obviously, because the people want more. But thank you all again. I want to remind our listeners, viewers, however you came to us, to follow us, give us some feedback. Look out for our next episode. And as I said, please share your feedback and topics you'd like us to cover, because it's such a broad array of things we can discuss, and I think we just want to kind of have fun with it. So even if it's wacky, throw it our way, and I promise you we'll find a way to squeeze it in. Thanks again, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
What did you say about wide angle, by the way? What did you want us to do with a wide angle?
How's my eyes? Who, me, Paul? Oh, Steph. Yeah, Steph, we can hear you.